Hey there, this is Shakita Niamke. I'm a licensed school psychologist and founder of Sanctuary Wellness and Education. We're private practice in University Heights, and we specialize in learning, behavior, and attention disorders for children and adolescents. This week, the executive functioning skill that we're going to be discussing is flexibility. Flexibility is defined as the ability to revise plans in the face of obstacles, setbacks, new information, or mistakes. Basically, we're being able to adapt to the changing conditions. Executive functioning skills are those brain-based skills that we need to be self-directed, move towards our goals, and regulate our emotions. Children who have difficulty with flexibility, and that means in actions and in thoughts, usually have difficulty with dealing with disappointment, have a hard time with change, maybe even have a hard time seeing a disagreement from a different angle. So maybe they are very rigid in their thinking and in their beliefs. Also they have difficulty adjusting to new situations or new people. That could be childcare or new school, or even like a new friend joining a social group at school. I see this a lot with individuals and students who deal with anxiety. So like students who have a high anxiety, also children who are diagnosed with autism or who are on the autism spectrum. And it can show up in really difficult ways for children, especially in the home, but also in the school setting. And so maybe, children will respond with tantrums or a lot of opposition. I see also this with individuals or students who are diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder. They tend to be inflexible. They don't want to do things other people's way. It's only their way, or typically they see things one way and they want it to just go that way. And so they kind of dig their heels in. There's a way that we can support children and adolescents who, may be more inflexible to changing situations. And I'll give you an example. I had a student who I was working with, and he would have these tantrums, and I would see him in the hallway, and this was even before I was working with him individually. With testing, I would see him and he would have these meltdowns, and it would really command the attention of multiple staff members. And so when I finally got around to working with him, he kind of was resistant. And I'd even share with the teacher, let the student know that I'm coming in advance. And so on our way to work together, it took him about 10 minutes to get down the hall because he was kind of dragging his feet. He was pouting. He didn't throw a full-on tantrum, but he was very resistant. And after talking to him, I really walked through and I said, hey, it seems like it's hard, you kind of get upset when you don't know what's coming, right? And he's like, yeah, I didn't know that you were coming today. And so, I wanted to finish X, Y, or Z, whatever he was doing in the classroom. And so I started to notice that if he didn't know that something was coming, if he didn't know what the plans were going to be, and nobody had reminded him repeatedly, like, hey, Mrs. Niamke is coming to work with you today, then it would create resistance in him. And so he would kind of dig his heels in. But the more familiar he became, and the more I reminded him, hey, don't forget, we're going to do this at lunch, or hey, don't forget, then it became easier for him because he knew what to expect. But he also began to learn me as a person, and he started to see that, this wasn't going to be a really difficult time, that we were going to be doing work. Even if there were things that he didn't like to do, I found different ways to kind of pull him through those tasks, but also offering support because I knew that he was really, really, he didn't like change, and it was hard for him to adjust. And so one thing that is really important with individuals or students who are inflexible is to help manage those expectations up front. If we can, what we call pregame, right? So pre-gaming is letting a student or your child know what to expect. Sometimes that's not possible. However, in those times when it's not possible, a simple role-playing activity could help your child to become a little bit more I guess, expectant of what might happen. And so let's say you are taking your child to a birthday party and their best friend is there, but then there's going to be other children there. And for a child who has difficulty with being flexible to changing situations, you might want to walk through a scenario where he says, hey, I know, your best friend is going to be there, but what are you going to do when there's other friends that are around and they have his or her attention? And walking through some possible scenarios on how your child can either manage that frustration, do something different as they wait to maybe interact with their best friend. But then it becomes something that they're familiar with. It's not this brand new situation. Of course, we can't manage everything that comes up, but the more that we're able to spend that time in advance with our child, we can kind of help them ease the anxiety and maybe some of the unfamiliarity with that situation, so that they don't become so frozen when that situation doesn't go as expected. Also, maintaining schedules. This is so funny because my son had to kind of call me out on this. And he's like, hey, you say, sometimes you tell me you're going to do this and then you don't do it until a couple of days later. And he really called me to the carpet about that. And he doesn't really have difficulty with flexibility, but imagine if he did. And imagine if I said I was going to do X and didn't do X at the time that I indicated, how that would create feelings of, frustration for him, but also, some distrust. And so we have to maintain schedules, maintain routines as much as possible for students who deal with difficulty being flexible, because we want them to feel trusted and safe in our environments, or the environments that we invite them to, but also in our relationship as parent and child. This can be, having a consistent bedtime. This could be having a consistent wake up time. I know that this is summer break, but we can also create routines and consistency even during unstructured times of the year or unstructured times of the day and week. And then using very concise language. So children who have difficulty with inflexibility, we want to be very specific with the language that we use. Maybe in our minds, and it's so funny because my son, he'll say, hey, you said maybe, but that usually means yes. But sometimes it means no. And so for a child who has difficulty with being flexible in thought, you want to be as concise and you want to be as direct as possible. You want to make sure that your yes means yes and your no means no. If there's wiggle room in there, maybe what you want to do is you want to think about when you can give your child a more definite answer and explain that up front. That could be your child asking you to do something and you're in the middle of your own work, or you have your own, time, things that you're managing. You're not able to give time and attention to that, but you do want your child to kind of leave you alone so that you can get your things done. It could be saying, okay, we're going to talk about this later at X, Y, and Z time. And then coming up with a definitive answer for your child if that is something that you want to do at that moment. I would avoid using ambiguous language, because for a child who thinks and is very rigid in their thoughts and or expectations of what is supposed to happen, can take that and really run with it, and it can cause conflict. So I hope this was a helpful few strategies for a child. If you have children who, who are on the spectrum, or you have children who tend to be more oppositional, have some difficulty with anxiety. Again, those are some of the behavioral health disorders that I've seen with children who have difficulty with being inflexible. If you need more help, or you have questions and you're looking to see if there's additional support that you can obtain, I encourage you to click the link below and schedule a time to talk. We do 15-minute free consultations to kind of go over what your concerns are, and then to discuss best next steps. If you thought this was a helpful piece of information, I encourage you to share it with family or friends, or even colleagues if you work in education or mental health. And I will be back next week with another executive functioning skill and strategies that you can use in the home or in the school setting to help your child develop.